Welcome to DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
It's your boy Andy, and welcome back to the DeFi Slate YouTube channel. Smash the like button on this video, that really helps us out, and sit back and enjoy the content. Thank you very much.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the DeFi by Design podcast, episode 69 here today. We are talking about all things layer 2. Definitely excited to see the world come to the layer 2 mindset. The ETH narrative is absolutely blooming right now. We've got the merge, we've got the growth of layer 2s, and we've just seen it all really just come to fruition. So I know a lot of ETH maxes are happy in their seats right now, and we're excited to scale Ethereum over here as well. It's kind of how we started. So excited to dive deep into some of the applications on Arbitrum, the difference in between some layer 2s, and just kind of what's going on over in this world and how you guys can get involved as part of our community. As always, here today with Rob. Rob, how we doing?
What's going on? Yeah, doing well. I mean, we're pumping. It's March 28th. Everything's up like 10%. Hunter hasn't checked prices in, months because we were in Goblin Town. But other than that, yeah, we're back, and we're looking good, and the building really never stopped. So I'm psyched to talk to Hunter and Peter and get after it here. And yeah, I'll pass it over to the lads and let them introduce themselves as well as Arbitrum.
Yeah, when I can go ahead. I'm the Hunter, the community manager over at Arbitrum. So I mainly just deal with anything related to the socials like Discord, Twitter, as well as any on-chain activities. I usually just define that as like on-chain degen activities. It's been a lot harder to do as of late, but it's still very, very fun to do.
Right on. And I'm Peter, Senior Partnerships Manager at Off-Chain Labs, primarily focused on DeFi, but also on accelerators and other initiatives that we have, and really just helping to grow the Arbitrum ecosystem and work here with Hunter on that mission.
Sweet. All right, so for those who aren't aware of what Arbitrum is, which I would imagine is probably a smaller kind of part of the folk who are listening to this, would love to just hear a brief overview of what an optimistic rollup is, why it's important, and kind of like how it ties into Ethereum, so we can really get a good understanding for this conversation of layer 2.
Sure. I'll take this one. So Arbitrum's an optimistic rollup, which means it's a layer 2 on Ethereum. And the most important thing to think about with that is that Arbitrum handles the execution and the information like on the Arbitrum chain, but it posts it back to the main Ethereum chain. And what this means is that it's able to get the security of Ethereum, but still handle things on the Arbitrum chain and keep things at a very low cost. And the nice thing about that is that Arbitrum's very aligned as far as being a roll-up centric roadmap. That Vitalik and other people have talked about, and this has helped us to attract a lot of Ethereum teams building on top of Arbitrum, because we're very aligned with Ethereum's roadmap towards a roll-up centric Ethereum. So this is what Arbitrum is. I don't know, Hunter, if you want to add anything there.
No, yeah, like pretty much exactly what Peter said. Optimistic rollup, instant transactions, 10 to 20x decrease in Ethereum fees in terms of actual cost, and all of the good old security that Ethereum provides. So yeah, the second best choice to Ethereum if you don't want the high gas fees.
So you basically batch all the transactions up that happen on Arbitrum into a rollup. So you kind of roll all these transactions up. And how many is in each block? Is it just dependent on how many transactions are in that block, or is there like a set amount that like the network tries to get into each rollup or into each like Ethereum block, if you will?
I think it's just time dependent. Like it's just however many transactions are occurring, the sequencer batches them and then puts them in there. So we don't have anything like a mempool, which is like what Ethereum has. We just have a sequencer that batches those and posts them. But the cool thing about Arbitrum is, like, let's say if Arbitrum goes down, you could still replay those transactions back on Ethereum. And this is what gives you that, Ethereum grade security that people are looking for, as opposed to a sidechain or some other alternative layer 1.
Yeah, so you batch all the transactions all together. Sorry, Rob. And basically you sequence them into one block on Ethereum as effectively one transaction on Ethereum. But on Arbitrum, there could have been 100 transactions, but it posts onto Ethereum, and you pay that one gas fee, which is, however much, on Ethereum, but you split that amongst all the transactions that happened on Arbitrum. Is that the kind of like the right outlook for how this works?
I think that's more or less right. That also implies that as Arbitrum gets a lot of transactions on it, we actually end up being one of the biggest contracts that posts data on Ethereum and uses the most transactions. And so if you've probably seen, if you use Etherscan and you look at, who's using the most, volume on Ethereum, you'll see Arbitrum's actually now showing up there at the top just because we're having so many users and so much, volumes going through Arbitrum in general, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And then of course with EIP 1559, that contributes to burning Ethereum, making it deflationary, and kind of the domino effect from there, which is super cool. And as Arbitrum scales, it's going to continue to ramp up more and more volume. That kind of batching technique is how we've seen users get almost the best of both worlds, or kind of like take their pick and move about on the scalability trilemma. Like someone can choose, they don't really have to choose anymore with that trilemma. They can kind of get Ethereum's security coupled with Arbitrum's convenience and speed.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my God, we were solving the trilemma. That's actually a great pitch. I just started saying that now. Yeah, good point.
We'll see it on the website tomorrow. Yeah, so that's super cool. Like that, of course, enables like all these new applications and innovations. What are some of the ones you guys are most excited about?
Yeah, so I don't want to play favorites or anything, because I think there's a lot of great teams in the ecosystem. I think what we tend to see is that there's two types of teams. One is like Arbitrum exclusive teams, and then the other would be like teams that want to go multi-chain. But some that I've thought about off the top of my head is like more Arbitrum exclusive teams would be like Vesta Finance, which is like the liquidity for Arbitrum, or like Tracer DAO, or like Cap Finance. And then some of the other multi-chain teams that I think are pretty cool would be like GMX, Dopex, Premia. A lot of these like options or perpetual based products are really cool. And I think the trend that we're starting to see too with Arbitrum is that teams are just choosing to deploy on like a layer 2 rather and just skipping mainnet altogether. And this is because the gas costs on Ethereum is just too high for some of these teams, and they're like, hey, we need to go somewhere where it's more affordable. And the cool thing about Arbitrum is we already have almost every single DeFi project building on top of Arbitrum. So if you're looking at different types of dependencies you're trying to solve, whether that's for stablecoins or Chainlink oracles or Gnosis Safe or whatever, we already have it. So we could be very helpful and supportive of those teams when they're building on Arbitrum.
Yeah, and I think actually to even add on to that, it's just like for some reason it seems like a lot of like leverage and perpetual protocols seem to be like really, really popular on L2, especially on Arbitrum. And not only that, but even like one thing we've seen actually grown a ton, especially this year, is like NFT and gaming on Arbitrum. Treasure obviously kind of leading that initiative, but there are like tons of more kind of like NFTs, like gaming platforms, like kind of sprouting from not only the Treasure ecosystem but from the community it made on Arbitrum, and that's something that we're really trying to cater to, as time goes on, because NFTs obviously is how the masses are going to get onboarded to crypto.
Yeah, and the pitch for developing anything on Arbitrum it's fairly easy, as Rob was kind of highlighting earlier. It's a matter of getting those teams and those protocols that have like huge amounts of deep liquidity on ETH layer 1, like Curve and Yearn and those kind of like OG DeFis, and getting them into these layer 2s. They call it like the layer 222 or something, but that's in our Twitter right now as well. I'm kind of curious what you guys think as far as what have been some of the key drivers of liquidity over, and what have users wanted to use the most, and what have been some of the key drivers as far as Arbitrum usage.
So one thing I want to say is that I think the strategy that the team took was very smart, and this like predates me. So I just want to like kind of give a shout out to my team for doing this strategy. But what they did was, it wasn't just from the technical point of view, it was like, how do we work with teams? And so the way they approached it was, they said, hey, we're going to have this period where all developers can build, and then eventually we'll go live on mainnet. And what this did is it solved for dependencies. And so, from what I heard from AJ, initially this started with teams like, I want to say it was Bancor that originally showed interest, but then we had just quite a few others kind of snowball into saying, hey, we want to build on Arbitrum, we want to build on Arbitrum. So it just kind of led to a snowball effect of more teams coming on board. And now, like, we're at a point where we have such critical mass that we're just trying to support teams and hire more people on our team to like handle the load on the BD side, but also on the engineering side, just because we have so many teams there.
Yeah, and to even like add on to that as well, I mean, it's like Peter was saying, like a dependency is not only on the infrastructure side, but also like on the DeFi side. Having like the like the big protocols like you mentioned earlier, like Curve, the Unis, the 𝗪𝐶is of the world, they're really important for like kind of any growing ecosystem. And even today, I think 𝗪𝐶i is technically the biggest dApp on Arbitrum with like roughly 600 something million in TVL, which it means a lot for a lot of the protocols that aren't like those big ones. I mean, I think like especially the biggest thing that we've seen recently in terms of liquidity, but also even like in terms of like transaction volume, is like Bridge World and like the different gaming that Treasure kind of brought. So like you're gonna hear us mention Treasure a couple times here. So shout outs to those guys.
I got small brains all the way, baby. That community is insane. That's how we met Hunter.
Yeah,
Treasure
actually, I can definitely just mention that. Yeah, like we were literally at ETH Denver. And Andy like comes up to the booth screaming at me that Magic's hitting all-time highs. That's actually what we met.
Because I heard that all the Arbitrum team was in early. I was like, of course they were. These mofos were in early. Kind of now that we've got the foundation of Arbitrum and kind of applications being built, and we've seen that we can scale these applications in DeFi and NFTs through Arbitrum, it kind of falls in line with the trend that we've been seeing in DeFi and in NFTs. But in these layer ones and in these layer twos and in these different layers, now even with the Stargate protocol, this like layer zero kind of concept, we're starting to see the idea of modular blockchains come to life, where you could make the argument that now because of layer twos, ETH is almost a modular blockchain where the execution and the settlement happen on different chains effectively, or different layers because of these layer twos. What are your thoughts with regards to the development of modular blockchains, and can you call Ethereum a modular blockchain, or do we still have stuff to build?
I mean, so we definitely, still have stuff to build. I'd say, Ethereum 2.0 or Ethereum itself is making its, way. It's not called 2.0 anymore, but it's making its way to progress towards the merge. But there's a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon there. So if you're following along, there's a great website that Liam from Optimism actually put together called 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵-844. And this talks about proto-dank sharding, which is the next version of sharding that's coming out. And this will be specifically geared towards rollups. And the cool thing about it is that it'll separate the transactions out. So if anybody executes something on the EVM, that doesn't affect what's happening with rollups. So rollups will be able to decrease their cost, and that's through data availability through sharding. But of course, I would also agree that like Ethereum's definitely heading towards this modular type of roadmap, and 𝗶𝗺𝗫, I think on Twitter, is doing an excellent job of like putting this narrative out there. And so as we make more progress with rollups, as like Arbitrum progresses towards its upgrade with Nitro, and Ethereum works on getting sharding out post merge, I think we're definitely going to get closer to that vision of a modular Ethereum.
That makes me super bullish on like self-custody kind of inevitably down the line, as the trend of modular chains and kind of the one blockchain to rule them all thesis kind of splits up and breaks out into all these different modular components. Self-custody, which was kind of originating with Bitcoin, seems to be the end state of that. And it's kind of starting with like these centralized islands. First as communities, as chains and communities, and then those are breaking more and more apart. And then they're able to kind of roll back up and execute transactions and interact with the same applications. Yeah, so kind of on that vein of like onboarding DeFi natives and then gradually kind of bringing more and more of the population that wasn't, DeFi or crypto native. You mentioned Treasure, and like Andy, saw that one right away. What is it about like some of these applications or like play to earn metaverse games that could attract and probably will attract non-crypto and DeFi natives?
I mean, I think it's definitely just, I think a great kind of like case study for that, and just kind of start off with is like 𝗪𝗧 Infinity and what they've been able to do on, on their own kind of Ronin sidechain, I think is what it is. It's just like, it's like the amount of value that these like games can have. And I say games like very with the air quotes, because I think currently right now, these aren't like first person shooter games, AAA games you'd expect to see like a Nintendo coming out with, but these are games where it's like you can almost like fund yourself depending on the country that you're in, and in a way it provides a lot more value than like any of your like average game, I would say, right? I mean, like, you have people literally in the Philippines like making livings off playing, for example, 𝗪𝗧 Infinity, of course, but then also you have the ability, just kind of like for most of us, the ability to kind of like use our NFTs as whether it be collateral, whether it be like as like tools in DeFi, or even like just kind of like this like it's like a RuneScape-esque universe that we're kind of building now, and giving use to like all these different applications that we're gonna see soon. Because I mean, even DeFi is still more or less in its infancy. It only really came around like Uniswap was a thing like back like 2 years ago or something. Like, so we're still like in all of its infancy, frankly. But especially NFTs in gaming. I mean, just like the amount of I think NFTs in gaming for sure will be like one of the biggest industries that's like tied to crypto by far. And Arbitrum is obviously I would argue like leading the charge in that currently.
And one thing I want to add there is I think it's like also still relatively early with NFTs. Like some stuff I've been experimenting with recently is like the music NFT side, like with Royal and like Decent and some of the royalty NFT stuff that they have there. And I think like that's really cool. Just different ways of like getting people to understand what ownership is and like actually owning these NFTs is really exciting. And I think they'll, these use cases will play out on Arbitrum as well. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of like a lot of these app-specific chains too. Like the Avalanche has their subnets coming out, and I think a lot of the IBC stuff with Cosmos is a lot of app-specific chains. To me, Arbitrum and Layer 2s are almost like an everything chain for all apps to be able to use and scale on. But there's definitely going to be some of these applications that want to have their own chain. How do you think that you'll kind of shape up against some of these applications that want their own chain for their own game or something? Like, kind of what are some key things to highlight that are different and important about, say, using a Layer 2, like Arbitrum for a game versus, say, creating your own chain on a different network? Kind of what are your thoughts on that whole environment?
I think application specific blockchains, whether they're with Cosmos or Polkadot, is like always going to be there, and like there will always be those use cases for teams that want to create those blockchains. I think when you look at the Layer 2 landscape, it's like most of the developers are still in Ethereum. Most of them are still building with Solidity. Most of the development is still in that realm, and so I think it's more like, there's probably nothing we can do aside from like AnyTrust chains, which is another product that we have coming out later, that will like even further lower the cost, get rid of the 7-day withdrawal period. And so I think, just continuing to do what we're doing just will create a compelling environment for them, because we will have access to all these DeFi teams or all these NFT teams, which may not be present necessarily on like a Cosmos or a Polkadot. And
more liquidity and more users, and I mean the bridging infrastructure is there. I
can definitely add on to that too. I think I would say for me it's like two things. So So like, like app specific chains, I think like the perfect example is ฎYDX, right? Like, like don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure the trading experience on ΔYDX is great. I haven't used it personally, but I'm sure it's much better like on their platform than it could be on any generalized chain, whether it be Arbitrum, Ethereum, or whatever it is. The problem though that you'll quickly find out is that there is no composability like at all. Like you can't all of a sudden now integrate NFTs or even any other type of application with your chain specific one, because all of a sudden you're interacting with different chains and you're going cross chain. And I think that's like one of the biggest things that projects need to think about before they think about either going to do something on their own chain and having to sustain that as well as their whatever application they want, versus just kind of building on an already built out you could say chain, and interact with projects already on there. And that's what we've seen do really, really good on Arbitrum so far. And being the community manager, like I can see all the different projects like collaborating with each other, and frankly, no pun intended, but it's like magic, literally.
Yeah, not it's great, not a chill or anything.
The EVM almost serves as that composability between different chains. If someone is building on, like I hear you about the NFTs, right? You can't like cross chain an NFT, otherwise it goes against the definition of fungible. But kind of leveraging EVM as it's almost like a hub and spoke at this point, now that we have like the hub as that security layer, the settlement layer, and then some of the execution environments around it. And with applications running on layer 2s, they have composability with other EVM compatible chains for, let's say triggering an action in a smart contract. If someone stakes an NFT in Arbitrum, it could trigger a mint over on Avalanche. And the kind of main chain data availability, I guess, kind of plays a role in that. And then also the settlement layer on the main chain, so that those transactions end up on I guess kind of a consistent ledger, is a potential use case here. And just like, I don't know, maybe there's new applications or developments that arise from kind of that cross chain element of NFTs.
It sounds like layer 0, man. It sounds like Stargate, man. It sounds like let's have funds on Ethereum, and then let's borrow against your funds on Ethereum on Arbitrum, pay back your loan on Arbitrum, and your funds are released on Ethereum. That
like cross chain is enabled through layer 0.
Yeah, I think Layer 0 is a great team, and like they have a really cool product with Stargate. Vitalik also has a really good blog post out there where he talks about the risks between doing this cross-chain stuff between rollups, as opposed to doing cross-chain stuff outside to another blockchain like an Avalanche or something else, where it introduces more risk complexity there. The other thing to keep in mind too with like application-specific blockchains is that you also have to be able to like run your own chain with your own validator set. It requires a bigger team. It's more of like, it's a bigger effort to like get a team that can actually, run an 𝗂𝗏 parachain or something like that. So I think that's why teams also just find it easy to deploy on Arbitrum, because it's the same, Ethereum kind of experience as opposed to doing that.
Yeah, let's dive into that real quick here about.
You muted yourself, Andy.
Oh, let's dive into the rollup and like the rollup to rollup communication versus like the rollup to a EVM compatible, proof of stake chain. So first of all, what does the current rollup to rollup infrastructure look like? Obviously there's bridges, but kind of like how can rollups communicate with each other?
Yeah, so there are bridges today. Most of the bridges are just doing token transfers, and so they're just moving assets from one to another. The way that they do that is many different ways. So it just depends on how the bridge is set up. But in short, if you're on an optimistic rollup like Arbitrum, you still have to wait for that 7-day withdrawal period. That's why a lot of the fast bridges, what they do is they check the chain to make sure that what's going on Arbitrum is legit. They move the funds over, and then after 7 days, they claim your funds. So that's how they do the fast bridge side of things. for the doing a smart contract call in a different chain, that's a whole nother endeavor, and I don't claim to be a bridge expert. So that's what I could say what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
and I can even throw in that, like, there are also people developing NFT bridges. It's actually some research that we're doing on our team as well. But like composable finance, for example, I know helped with bridging some of the legions over earlier on. And I'm not sure exactly how they did that. I'm sure they have stuff in the back end, but like finding out how to actually make it so that you can bridge NFTs, because it's going to happen at some point, and I'm sure there's going to be a generalized bridge that hopefully a generalized standard that everyone uses, and kind of making sure how that's like how the base NFT is handled, how the one that's actually bridged is handled, and all that stuff is going to be very important, as well as royalties too. That's also going to be a big thing. If you have royalties set up on OpenSea, you bridge it over to Arbitrum, and you start to use it on Trove or Stratos or whatever other marketplace you're using, then all of a sudden, like, what happens if you sell it there? Like, it's a whole bunch of questions that still need to be answered, and frankly, I'm sure we'll probably see something, this year for sure.
yeah, and it comes down to the user. Then in 2-3 years, somebody who's never used DeFi before, to just be able to go and to seamlessly do all the things that we're talking about right now, which 2 years ago when we were having these conversations was like only on Ethereum and only if you select applications. Now it's like we're going to be able to do all of this, and we have to figure out also how to have the user basically feel like they're not even doing any of this, and that it's all just kind of happening in the back end. That's going to be a very exciting moment when there's a mobile app that you can have where you're just on all sorts of chains doing all sorts of stuff, and it just truly feels like you're just you almost don't even know that you're using these different chains or using DeFi.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with you. I would also say that some teams are even progressing a bit further in this case, where they're integrating things like Hop or some of these fast bridges just natively into their page, so users can just do the action rather than like going on a completely separate website. Because I think now what people realize is like making the user do a whole bunch of extra steps, probably not a good idea. So probably you want to reduce those steps to make it simple for them. And like, a great example of that is Uniswap. Like Uniswap, you just click like the button a few times and then you do a trade. It's very, very simple compared to like an order book based deck. So yeah, totally bullish on seeing more of those, instances coming forward.
So what do you guys think about the current liquidity kind of fragmentation amongst layer twos? And do you guys have any, like the upgrades that you're coming out, would love to hear about that, as a means to incentivize more liquidity. And if you have any other plans, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So one thing I would say is, of course, we don't have a token and we don't have any token incentives right now. But what I can say is that it is totally true that there is liquidity fragmentation going on right now. Though we tend to believe that it is a battle for liquidity going forward. The layer twos that have the most liquidity are going to be the ones that win. And so, we try to be very thoughtful in working with teams. How can we have different teams partner with each other? How can we be helpful in, driving more liquidity the best that we can on Arbitrum? And like, I don't know if you saw this, but there's a tweet that came out earlier from 𝗷𝗄 where it was showing, what's the volume that's on 𝗷𝗄, the new instance that just came out. And I think Arbitrum was like number 2. We don't even have a token. We don't have any token incentives. And so I think that's pretty amazing. But yes, it will be a battle for liquidity. I don't have a great answer there. I know the Starkware team has their DAM product where they're trying to, handle this liquidity between all the different instances on Starkware. But that's just not our core focus at the moment. It's just like, how do we get more liquidity? How do we add more centralized exchange integrations? How do we add more fiat on and off ramps? Those types of things.
And I think actually, Peter, like you said it right there. I mean, currently, like a great way of just doing that is getting more on and off ramps, getting more exchanges on board. Which, by the way, we have a ton already: Binance, FTX, Huobi, Crypto.com, just to mention a few. But like also even just like incentivizing protocols to have their own liquidity, like protocol liquidity. Olympus Pro being one of them that you can actually leverage on Arbitrum already. I think that's definitely one thing that I think it's kind of overlooked a little bit, that like people aren't coming to Arbitrum necessarily just for Arbitrum, for the tech. People are coming because of the protocols that are on Arbitrum. Like, I mean, again, like we've had a ton of move over because of Treasure, GMX, DopeX, some of those like the big players, the bigger players on Arbitrum, and because of a ton of other different dApps. I mean, Aave, as Peter mentioned, just deployed as well, so that's another driver of liquidity. The more dApps that deploy, like in a way, I guess you could say that there is technically more liquidity fragmentation because you see when a dApp deploys, that comes with another token. But in a way, that also brings more users for the most part, especially when a bigger dApp deploys. So I've definitely seen like liquidity fragmentation become less of an issue over time. But the hope is that we just kind of the partnerships team obviously is amazing. Shout out to Peter. he's obviously on it. And I have no doubt in my mind that we're going to get the rest of the huge exchanges, so the masses can really onboard themselves on Arbitrum, with a click of a button. Oh, I think you're muted, by the way.
Yep. And you guys there's at least one, if not two upgrades. One is the Nitro upgrade, which is going to drastically lower fees, I presume. So kind of walk us through, honestly, walk us through kind of some of the past upgrades as well, what they've done to Arbitrum and kind of what you've seen. And then, what's up with Nitro, or at least, what's coming with Nitro in terms of, the scalability and whatnot.
Sure. So, I mean, I joined in October, so I watched Arbitrum 1 go live, but I wasn't yet working for Off-Chain Labs. But I know with Nitro, the team has finished audits and is working towards a test net. And so that's going to be really exciting. That's going to help to improve execution speed. It's also going to help to, reduce gas costs a bit more. And it's also just, native with Geth, and so it's just going to be easier for developers. It's going to be more EVM compatible, so we're really excited about that upgrade. I would also say that the other thing that we're working on is decentralizing our validator set, and so instead of us just being the only ones who run it, we're also going to have others that will participate as well, and so that's exciting. That will be coming, and then after that, we'll also be working on decentralizing the sequencer. So we kind of have 3 core things that we're working on, and right now it's just all hands on deck with Nitro and getting Nitro out the door.
And also to even add there, so before Nitro, it's funny because we're definitely one of those teams that that's consistently building, and I guess doesn't have enough time to announce it every time we do. But we've shipped actually multiple different I wouldn't say upgrades, but multiple I guess you could say improvements to the system since we went live back in August, and that's why if you look at L2fees.info to date, I would still say really the cheapest rollup on average, or cheapest optimistic rollup, I should say, on average in general, because we're constantly delivering different improvements on the system, even with Nitro coming up. As Peter mentioned, you kind of mentioned the different things that comes along with Nitro, but yeah, people just like cheap fees and doing the things that they want to do on Arbitrum, degenning.
Yeah, maybe one other thing I want to share is if you look across the board with all these multi-chain dApps, Arbitrum is definitely leading it with volume. So you guys mentioned earlier that we have the most TVL, but if you go to Uniswap Analytics today, you could see that we're doing a bit more volume than some other teams, and maybe we're not there with Polygon, but Polygon has a token and token incentives and other things going on, and so I think we're doing a phenomenal job. And so if you're a founder, you're building on Arbitrum, you're going to have that liquidity. You also know that if you're going to be deploying an NFT, as you could see, Hunter talks about it all the time, there's just incredible demand for free NFTs on Arbitrum, getting on those whitelists and whatnot. So I think as a founder, you're just going to have a great experience, building with Arbitrum in general.
Do you guys find yourselves speaking with large players ever in terms of partnerships or bringing on say for example, any of the large VCs in crypto or even outside of crypto that can really see the vision of layer 2s and of Ethereum, and how does that go? What kind of contact do you kind of have in that world as kind of a chain, without a token, just basically a neutral place for people to use Ethereum products? Kind of how does that communication tend to go kind of with that world of crypto?
Well, I know in the VC world, Pantera Capital was a pretty early investor in off-chain labs. So, Joey Krug and those guys, identified off-chain labs pretty early. And so hats off to them. I would say, like, as far as like bigger teams or whatnot, we've had conversations with larger players like in the gaming space, and we're excited to progress there. I think our core focus today is more on like the crypto native teams. How do we win most of these like really talented Ethereum teams over? And if we can do that, I think we can be really successful.
I also got to shout out Size Chad. He's also on the team. That dude somehow happens to get I mean, I don't want to say acquisitions, but he happens to have like so many connections that blow my mind every time he mentions it. Peter as well, definitely. Like Size is just like a whole different guy.
That's awesome.
So, he's special.
Nice. Yeah, it's always just good to see people willing to commit to building out like the Ethereum vision. And just growing that space. I mean, this year really is going to be like the layer 2 growth. Like I imagine that we see TVL on layer 2s kind of scale up past a lot of these alternative layer 1s as we kind of see just the liquidity just drive. It might take something like one of these alternative layer 1s that I would never wish it, but kind of see some security issues or something, or perhaps it's ETH layer ETH 2.0 or the merge, which really gets the attention. Do you guys think the merge is going to happen in June? Is it going to happen this time?
I hope so. Hard to say exactly, but we hope it's going to happen. Yeah,
I think so.
How would that affect rollups or Arbitrum or kind of like does it affect what's kind of because for those who don't, honestly, if you want to just explain kind of what the merge is, that would be fantastic. I can try my best, and then we can go into like how the switching of chains kind of affects rollups and what.
Sure. So to break it down, Ethereum's doing like 3 major upgrades. The first one was the launch of the Beacon chain. I'm also running some validators for that, so I think that went really well, and that's the first launch of the proof of stake chain. But there's nothing else really going on there except the validators running transactions and then being compensated for doing that. What's happening in June, hopefully, is the merge where Ethereum's moving from proof of work to proof of stake. And so that's a huge upgrade, a huge endeavor, because it requires a lot of coordination across all the different client teams and so forth to make that actually work and make it be a success. And it's been many years in the making. And so that's really exciting. And then the third upgrade that's coming is sharding. So sharding is data availability, specifically for rollups. So I mentioned proto-dank sharding earlier, and that is going to just help to lower fees and for it to be a lot faster and cheaper. So I think as far as for Arbitrum itself, I don't believe the merge would really impact us a whole lot. But I think that we will be heavily involved in a lot of conversations as far as like BLS signatures go, or like some of the sharding stuff down the line. 𝗵𝗏𝗋𝗋's involved in that. So that's where we would be taking place in those conversations.
So no abrupt changes or anything. It should be able to be a smooth transition, even with the switching of chains.
Yeah, and I think you throw that in there too. Like, I think something people forget a lot is that layer 2s is literally part of the scaling roadmap. Like this is how Ethereum scales from an execution standpoint. It's funny that I've been going to a lot of conferences recently, obviously, with some people from our team, and like a lot of people don't realize that the transaction at Ethereum is cheap again. Like literally, your only savior is Arbitrum and other layer 2s. So it's layer 2 is already but we're already scaling Ethereum as we speak. So like the first part, as Peter mentioned, the Beacon chain has already happened. And then this invisible part that people seem to forget, layer 2 part, it's already happening as we speak, and it's only going to get better as Ethereum completes the rest of the steps that it has to take, like the merge and sharding.
Yeah, and there's all this kind of like momentum, right? That's like building up, and I think it's kind of like fallen short in the past with like ETH merge, not happening, but it's kind of been higher lows, to use like a TA kind of thing, right? Like it just continues to level up, and like we've gotten to the point where now like there's like development almost given like that people want to build on Ethereum. So when it comes to kind of the coordination of it all, like this has been a massive undertaking on the main chain to gear up for the merge and ultimately for it to take place. How do you guys coordinate kind of, so that kind of look to learn from mistakes that happened leading up to the merge and kind of all of that coordination? How do you guys take lessons away, and what are some of the things you've learned
I think
to implement over on Arbitrum?
Okay, I think Rob's back. So to answer that question, from what I've seen from my own personal experiences, people are running test nets or like incentivized test nets. And, this started more or less when I was at Tendermint with 𝗁𝗍, running incentivized test nets for Cosmos. But I think, for Ethereum, you've seen the Krillin test net that they're running with the merge. And so I think we're doing the same thing with Nitro. We're going to be running it with, a lot of other teams going to be testing Nitro, making sure that we find all the bugs and everything on that end, and then eventually we'll go live in production. So I think that's the general process. Nice.
And what's kind of the timeline for that improvement or upgrade, the Nitro?
I believe that we've finished audits, and so we're very close to releasing the testnet. And then after a couple months of doing that, then we'll go live in production. But the nice thing about it for developers is like they won't have to do anything on their end, so they'll just be able to use the same code and get the same upgrade without changing anything on their end. So it's a relatively like seamless experience for them.
I should say we never release states unless we know they're going to be out by that date. Same thing we did for mainnet and that before that. So you're never going to see a date from us and have a pushback. So that's why you probably have not seen like a confirmed date out there yet. We'll definitely give you like a couple of months timeline.
Nice.
Yeah, that helps, right? Like you're saying, kind of a couple of months timeline, and then when it's known like that's when it's almost published. And then like also like any like human coordination lessons that you have implemented on Arbitrum that are a result of kind of the massive network that Ethereum's built.
I would say from an ecosystem standpoint, it's just making sure that we have time and I should say also like capacity, like manpower, I guess, better word, to like make sure that we're talking to every team and making sure that all their needs are being met from us. That's one thing that I think a lot of I think maybe not even just layer twos, but just chains in general. We'll have to deal with is, not only bringing people to your ecosystem, but also making sure that they're happy being there. So that's introducing them to other players in your ecosystem, and just making sure their needs are met. Because it's definitely not easy sustaining an ecosystem full of like literally hundreds of dApps. Definitely not. Yeah. 25 people, by the way, I should mention. 25 people on the team, and half of them are entities. So yeah.
Sheesh. So where is
the coordination when ETH was small is easy. When it becomes more modular, it's difficult, and you guys are solving that by talking to every team and getting their input.
So now that people have stayed on for 40 minutes, we can give them the real juice. These are the real loyal listeners right here. Where is the best yield on stablecoins and the best yield on ETH on Arbitrum? And would love to hear the juice about GMX and GLP and kind of your thoughts on those. But first, the stable and ETH yields.
So I'm familiar, since you guys mentioned Layer 0 earlier, I know that Layer 0, their Stargate product, they have I want to say a farming that's going on right now. So you can earn, I think, 20% yield in STG if you stake with USDC. So that's really good yield. I've also been told from my teammates that 100 Finance is pretty good. Hunter was telling me earlier today, Aave's yields are pretty high. So those are some areas you can look at.
Definitely want to give a little shout out to our friends over at SpearX as well. I think they have their own stable token as well. And I think the yields there are pretty good as well. I should also mention, this is both me and Peter. None of this is financial advice, so keep that in mind, please. But definitely all those different platforms for USDC and all the other different stables. As for ETH, so I mean, listen. At the end of the day, the best ETH yields you're going to get is probably using leverage. So please be careful. Shout out to the GMX. Shout out to cash. Shout out to all the different leverage products. But actually, honestly, even like options products. I mean, options products are actually really good, especially if you know how to use them. I guess that's with anything, really. But like I know 𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗵 has like their single-sided vaults. So like those are pretty good if you're not really too sure about how options work. But in general, I mean, there are a ton of different options you can use, frankly, on Arbitrum. Ton.
Yeah. SpareX is super cool. That's super low key, and I've been messing around there for some time now. Definitely some of the best yields that I've seen. Obviously, you have to deal with like the synthetic dollars, which is always like a you never kind of know situation. But that's solid, real solid. And my buddies keep telling me about GLP, something about. There's this GMX product called GLP that is really good yield, and just to check it out. So I got to check that out, but I haven't done too much DD. But so far my experiences have seen that like just kind of being there, being early has just been good in terms of yield and opportunity. And I don't know, like I just never feel like worried about Arbitrum. Like I don't really feel worried about like Avalanche or Phantom or any of these other chains. But like I just know that like I'm good. Like I'm chilling on Arbitrum, no stress. Like, funds ain't going anywhere, chilling.
You know exactly who to go after, you know what I mean? Is that why? No. Yeah, no, listen, I'm telling you, like, I think I was talking to our CTO yesterday, because we were at the Harvard blockchain conference. We gone there in person. I think we'd agreed that like 60% of the team is engineers, 40% currently is like non-engineering essentially. And that's only a recent thing. Like pretty much like, for the past couple of months, our team has been literally mainly just engineers. And mind you, a lot of them don't even probably don't even use like, Arbitrum or like even just crypto in general. So that's how you know they're legit. They're not degen, they're actual engineers. I'm the degen of the team, so is Peter a little bit. So yes, you can definitely have faith in the protocol itself. But it is in beta, so keep that in mind. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, solid. Definitely excited to see just liquidity grow. I mean, that's going to be the big thing. Like, let's get whales in there LPing on the major dexes, and then we can really scale. Definitely excited for that. I mean, as we kind of wrap up here, if you guys had to pitch Arbitrum to a celebrity and not slap them in the face like Will Smith did last night to Rock, that's a whole other ball game there. Who would it be, and why would you pitch it to this person?
Ooh, that's a good question. I guess I'll say Chris Rock. And the pitch I would give him is I would say to him, imagine if you could trade NFTs and yield farm in DeFi at 90 to 95% cheaper cost and much faster speed. That's Arbitrum in a nutshell.
I think he would look at you, Peter, and be like, huh? All right, take my money.
Ooh.
He'd be like, take my money,
yes. Yes.
I'd pitch it to Ashton Kutcher, so I was telling him to go ahead and bridge his stoner cats over to L2, so he can gamify them and have people actually use them for once instead of royalties. That doesn't even work.
Yo,
I like
tag Ashton Kutcher. Get him to see this.
There you go.
You love to see it, man. You love to see it. Yeah, guys, thanks a lot for hopping on. It's a pleasure. Excited to see our Arbitrum scale and support it. And definitely picked up some good info here. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right.